Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss all the best stories in college football. Thanks for joining us tonight for our weekly recap. Joining me, as always, is my buddy Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, how are you doing?
The voice is recovering. We're having a lot of fun watching some NFL football and really just kind of enjoying what's been an on and off rainy weekend. So
Y-
all
Yeah,
good.
it's.
How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Sadly, my poor son had to go to the hospital today. We had to get some stitches, but tis the nature of having three boys. We roughhouse. We have some good times, and sometimes you get messed up, but you get up and you keep on trucking, just like these Canes. 9-0, right? That's what we are, boy.
9-0.
9-0.
For the
I
first
cannot
time
believe.
since 2017, 9-0.
I know it's and it's funny to think about that season too. It's wild because like you almost forget because of how disappointing the ending was of that season that we went 10-0. But this
Yeah.
season I feel like it's different. So let's get into this Duke game. Duke losing in horrible fashion. My God. I mean, the comeback Canes back at it again. I cannot believe we had another game like this. The Canes beating Duke 53-31. What are some of your thoughts on this game, Rudy? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about yesterday?
I was thinking is it possible to have a quiet 300 something yards? Because at some point in the fourth quarter, that's what we were all kind of talking about in our seats was how is Cam having a quiet 340, 350 passing? And then, a couple bombs to Jacoby George and Xavier Restrepo to break that all-time receiving record really kind of lit the place up. So it wasn't quiet for much longer after that. The one thing I
Yeah.
would say though is that first half, the crowd was dead. The
Yeah.
team did a really good job of getting the crowd back into it, and that's when things started turning around.
Yeah, the funny thing is well, first I went back and had to look because I was pretty sure I wrote this down in my notes. I was like, that's the worst first half we've had since the Cal game, and then it was similar with the Vatech game. Um, I mean, I was really honestly like I always like to give our opponents their just dues because then we're gonna go into how we just destroy them. But like I thought Duke played an incredible game. I mean, Malik
Yeah.
Murphy threw for 325 yards, three touchdowns. I mean, you couldn't ask more. And then what who else? Who's that wide receiver for them?
They had 2 of them. They had
Higgins.
Moore and they
Higgins
had
and
another guy.
more. I mean, Higgins had 139 yards, nine receptions. His long was for 34. Each of them grabbed a touchdown. I thought their wide receivers played a stellar game. Honestly, I mean, they were making catches that were just I couldn't believe it. Like there were times where I was just like, oh, that's an incomplete pass. No, it was caught. He had a toe in, and I was just like, my God. And then it was just the tale of two halves again, which is really weird because I mean we'll get in more into the nitty gritty, but I just feel like for all my DBZ fans, like we are not coming out in our final form. Like we're just regular Goku. We're not Super Saiyan level 3 yet. And I think we people know our potential, and we just need to be Super Saiyan level 3. Just come out, have like the turquoise hair, have the tail, and let's just like murder these teams because it's like we're playing with our food. It feels like every game like this. I mean, Florida State aside, because I mean, God, rest in peace, Florida State. But like we should be winning these games. Like it's like, and I even think I alluded to it in our preview for this. I was like, do we come out guns blazing in the first half and put it away by halftime, or do we lull ourselves to sleep in the first half and then come out guns blazing? And that's kind of what happened. I mean, I thought we looked good. The first quarter was a phenomenal first quarter. I thought we did well, went up 14-0. But then there was this weird second quarter where it was just all Duke. Like they came back and then they went up, and I just was like, what is happening? What do you think was going on? Specifically, let's start with the defense because I feel like that's where we gave up the most points was in that second quarter going into the third quarter. What do you think was going on?
A lot of miscommunication and just a lot of mismatches. I mean, there were things there, like there was one play specifically where, Kiko Maui Noah had to go out and cover a slot receiver. And I just
Yeah.
had immediate PTSD from like, what was it, 2011, where Sean Spence had to go cover CJ Spiller with a hamstring and Spiller burns him for a touchdown. And it was kind of the exact same play. So I think there were some personnel mismatches that Miami fixed after that opening drive of the second half, because just given there were injuries, obviously, like Miami's defensive backs happened later in the game, but there were formations out there. I'm watching three safeties, and you're seeing Mish Powell, Jaden Harris, and Zaquan Patterson. And I think everyone's seeing too, Miami started running a little bit more man with Zaquan Patterson in the game, and that dude is a heat-seeking missile. So that was
Yes.
definitely one of the adjustments that was made. But again, I just go back to it's misdirection and just miscommunication from Miami side because uh, as much as look in my collective area, at least where I was sitting, a lot of sour grapes in the first half and coming into halftime about like the defense is just not making the right adjustments. They can't get a pass rush. They can't get anything together. And I'm sitting there going,
Yeah, I
well,
felt that way
yeah, Duke's
too.
getting the ball out in 2 seconds. You can't, it negates a pass rush if you know, get the ball out in 2 seconds. You're not getting sacked that way unless you have unless you're blitzing Manny Diaz style with like a free hitter coming through. There's no way you're going to get pressure on a quarterback that quickly. So I think it was just good game planning. It was good offense by them in terms of exposing Miami's defensive weaknesses, and it's something that Miami was doing well with for the first quarter because they look Duke's first possession after the touchdown was an interception by Mish Powell. It was one of those where they were trying to
Yeah,
go deep.
I think
Yeah,
that third quarter drive is kind of, it was funny. When I took my middle child, Aiden, I took him for his first game, which we had a great time. It was awesome. He loved it. But we sat in our normal seats, right? And it was the first time I had sat there all season. And I was joking with the guys. I was like, the people that we sit with, our friend Frank. I was like, it's the first time, so like, don't get mad
fire
if we go.
Frank.
Yeah, I was like, don't get mad if we go down. And sure enough, it's like we're getting to halftime, and it's like Duke's coming back, and they go up, and I'm just like, I'm gonna go to the other seats. I'm gonna go back to the seats that we've been, because we have some friends who have a suite that have invited us up and been gracious to us to get us in, because we've been there every game, and every game we've won. And it was funny. We went up there after halftime, and I kid you not, that was the drive that we got to the end zone, got within 3 points. We did the 2 point conversion, and then that's when you could sense. I felt like that 2 point conversion really lit a fire in the entire team. Especially, I think what I thought was poetic about it was Cam who went in for the QB draw for that 2 point conversion. Because from there, the next series for Duke was that Mish Powell. No, it was OJ Federic. Excuse
Yep.
me, that was OJ Federic's interception. That was an awesome return. And then from there, I just felt like that was when the game got back under control. And it was weird because, like I said, it almost feels like the defense is trolling us. Like it's like they're just like, "Are you guys paying attention? Is anyone watching?" And I know this sounds stupid, but it'll be interesting to see. And I don't think we'll find out till we get to Charlotte, but I almost feel like this team has to find some way of getting up. And it's not the initial, like the whistle of the kickoff. It requires them to be down. It requires them to kind of feel like it's almost like I don't want to say they're playing lazy, but like it's almost like they're like kind of just like they've got like a really horrible sleep inertia. And it's just like it takes some time for them to get off and then take off, because while the offense was clicking for a few drives, the defense, like we said, was just really, really bad in that first half. And then even going into a portion of the second half, and it wasn't until that 2 point conversion that I felt like by OJ Federic that like they were like, okay, now we're turning it on. Now we're gonna start getting pressure. Because you could tell also Malik Murphy started to play a little bit more free, and he started to play a little bit more, he started throwing a little bit more riskier passes in that third quarter. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. Like I think Miami, yeah, the 1-0 mentality is one thing to say that you're only preparing for your next opponent, but at the same time, there is this outer noise of like Miami hasn't really played a complete game since really UF, and
Yeah,
that wasn't
I
really
agree.
arguably a complete game. Like, a couple of busted coverages here and there, but like when it comes to being determined and focused from start to finish, like all of the hype going into that game, it's almost as if Miami is going to the way, at least optimistically I feel about it, is that Miami is going to be more focused playing higher ranked competition than they are just kind of middling around in the ACC right now, where it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, and you have to be on your game to beat everybody, but Miami's not clicking on all cylinders unless they feel like they got Ohio State or Oregon or Alabama or whoever it is that's coming on the other side. That's when it feels like they're really going to come out and give it 100% at every snap. So how did it feel like? Yeah, once Miami really started getting its offense back in order there in the second half and they started scoring on consecutive drives again, Duke had to get desperate. So they had to go
Yeah,
one dimensional. Malik Murphy had to force things a little bit more. They couldn't quite run the offensive system that they were hoping to run. And that's when you started forcing mistakes. So if the ball wasn't exactly on the money, or hey, there's more pressure that's coming towards Murphy, that's when interceptions start happening. And some of those
yeah,
deep balls were overthrown, and also some of the tip balls. I mean, look, Miami forced 4 turnovers. Three of
yeah.
them
That
were
was
in the
great.
second half, 2 picks and a fumble.
Yeah. And I mean, what was concerning for me with the defense were two things. One, we only had 4 tackles for a loss. We only had 1 sack. So the pressure wasn't there. And I'm not sure what's going on. Last week, it was more apparent that it was we were in the backfield, but we just couldn't grab the QBs and get them down. But this time, it felt like, I'm not sure from your perspective, but from my vantage point, it felt like we just weren't getting that pressure. We weren't getting in as much. And that Duke O line was actually holding really well. I thought another thing, and I've been saying it all season, but like I was like, wow, I'm like, I didn't notice it till this game's in particular, but these underneath flat passes are killing us. They scored twice with that play.
Yep.
FSU did the exact same thing. I guarantee if you go back to the Cal game, you go back to the Vatech game. Vatech was more like sweeps, but like this underneath pass where either you bootleg or you waggle out, we can't stop. We can't make adjustments, and especially when there's a motion. So if there's a motion going in the opposite direction, our linebackers get very confused, and there's a slight hesitation, which allows the guy from the underneath to get open, wide open. It happened both with who was it? Higgins and Moore. Both of their touchdowns came like that. Higgins was going towards the east end zone, and then Moore in the west end zone in the third quarter.
Yeah, the couple things that scare me there, it's there's a couple things that I believe is going on in this situation. And when it comes to the D line, I think what they were worried about was a lot more mobility from Malik Murphy. So what you're watching them doing is instead of just trying to like shed the offensive lineman and get upfield, because again, that's kind of a sign of like Manny Diaz aggressive defense. Is that if you're getting so far upfield, you're now worried about draw plays, worried about screens, worried about a mobile quarterback. But if they escape pressure, there's just like
Yeah.
nobody coming. So I noticed that like you're watching a lot more technique where they're kind of like holding their spot, kind of like the old Al Golden, like read and react defense, where we're watching them kind of engage with the linemen that are going to shed them at the right time. So it's like if they
Yeah.
see RPO and they see the ball get handed off, they're trying to shed the lineman and get the tackle. Or if they're holding place, like, look, we'd rather contain Murphy in the pocket and just have him try to beat us by sitting there and throwing it than having him be dangerous on his feet. I totally get that, but there's got to be a way to like mix that up in the sense of like bring one guy free, try to keep some kind of contain. And then also, I think defensively, one thing that we struggle with a lot is how we bring in the defensive play call. Because even though Mary
Yeah.
Noah is wearing the headset, the one thing I've noticed a lot of is that you're seeing a lot of players look over at the sideline for what the play or what the adjustment's supposed to be. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, while their head is focused on what's going on, you're missing motions from
Yeah.
Duke.
And
You're
and
missing
and
way, yeah,
And I'm very concerned about the motions. I'm glad you brought that up because it's not only like I said on those underneath passes that are in the flat that are getting us with the motion, but like whenever they motion in general, there is a lot of confusion. Not so much with the D line; those guys are solid. The front four solid, but when you get to that secondary level and then the third, like they don't know who to coverage sometimes. Like there were 2 times where where Duke flipped their wide receivers, and you could just tell like there were some adjustments that were perfect. It was like seamless, but then there were some where they were talking to each other, and you could just tell there was utter confusion until the ball was snapped. I mean, luckily they weren't big plays, and we were able to play sound defense on those specific plays. But again, it's like it's how you do some things is how you do all things. And I you watch these little things and you're just like, if that was a really good team, they could easily take advantage of us in that aspect. One thing I will say for our secondary, as questionable as they were, and they again, I would agree. Would you say they were the weak part of the defense this game as well?
Between them or the linebacking core. I mean, it's always one of those two, and it's either
Yeah,
they're isolated. A lot of the offense is trying to isolate Maui Noah. I don't know. I have to go back and look and see if we actually ran an additional defensive back for part of the second half because I don't remember seeing a whole lot of West Saint, but I also remember that there have been like rotating guys in. It was nice to see a lot of young guys play like late in the second half. So some of the numbers were confusing to me because,
yeah,
historically you watch Miami teams, if you see like 22s, 24s, you're thinking, okay, defensive backs. and
Right.
24 is Malik Murphy in one
Yeah.
case, 22 is Robbie Washington. So it's like, or no, I'm sorry, not Robbie Washington. I think who is Booker Pickett Jr. got his first sack for Miami in that game. I think he's wearing 22 defensively. So it's one of those where it's like there's a whole lot to like understand and notice, but yeah, between those two units, because
Yeah. Booker
if you can
Pickett's
get a tight
33. Yeah.
end or you can get a wide receiver, that slot receiver on the linebacker, that's a mismatch most of the time. And I think that's why Miami switched to three safeties to try to deal with some of that personnel.
Yeah, it's I'm a little concerned about the flatness of the defense, especially like in first halves when we're playing these close games because again, I also because people are always going to say the antithesis is that is like when you play a quality team, you can't just count on your offense to get you out. The issue is that we also no one stopped us. I mean,
No.
53 points. It's just like covering the spread once again. It's like, well, who's going to stop? Who's going to stop us? And watching the games this weekend, I mean, my God, I mean, that will be the one benefit I will say of having the noon game this weekend was I was able to catch some of the other games throughout the night, and it was a wild. We don't have to get into it. We'll get into it later this week. Some of the games that we watched, but it's just watching Clemson fall. Like
Yeah.
Go Louisville for one. Like they played their hearts out. Pitt getting destroyed like that. I mean, you're just watching teams that you think would have sound defenses, and that would we would challenge us in Charlotte, right? Now I'm feeling pretty confident going into Charlotte. I mean, I know I'm putting the cart in front of the horse, but I realistically think that the rest of our schedule is pretty manageable. I think we'll be fine with Georgia Tech this coming week and the rest of the schedule. And so I just am I'm a little worried with this defense in terms of again that weakness with the flat. It gets us every time, and then the miscommunication. Do you think that can be patched up? Do you think that'll get better, or is this just something we're gonna have to ride with and then just hope Cam bails us out every week?
I think it's a mixture. I think there's going to be like shades of those mistakes that happen. Hopefully, not as consistently. Like maybe you'll get one out of every like five defensive possessions are going to make some sort of mistake like that. It's what I've noticed is if they make one mistake, like the entire drive is compromised. We joked about it a couple weeks ago, calling it Ricky Bobby defense. It's like
Yeah,
you're either first or you're last. You get a
yeah,
three and out or a turnover, or you're just getting marched down the field and scored on. It's kind of still like that. It's
it
just
is.
when the energy level changed is when you really saw that defensive intensity kind of step up too. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure as a defensive player, if I'm going out there and the stadium is really calm and quiet and you're trying to like have noise to help you, that's definitely going to affect your psyche a little bit. These are still kids, and even though they are a defense and it's their job to stop an offense, if you feel that the stadium isn't engaged in the game, that's going to affect you. And that's exactly what kind of the first half and even the beginning of the third quarter, that opening drive by Duke. I remember going into halftime thinking, God, if the defense can get a stop for the opening possession of the second half, because there was that threat that Duke could go
Yep.
2 for 1 in terms of possessions. And what do? They go down, they march and score a touchdown opening possession the second half, thinking, okay, this place is deflated. Miami's offense bails them out, and that's what gets the crowd back into it.
Yeah, I think it was Pat Ford who was like talking trash about like he was like, I can't believe Miami was favored by 3 touchdowns, and it was just like, don't count us out, pal.
Let's
Wait
be
till those
honest.
what
Everybody's trash in Miami. I mean, if you look at like the
yeah,
Paul Feinbaum stuff too, like we're happy to address that now and say, what's it called? Travis Hunter did more PR for himself for the Heisman campaign by going to College Game Day because he's hurt than what Cam Ward did on Duke. Come on, man. Like,
yeah.
no, I'm sorry. That Cam Ward had like 130, 140 passing yards in the first half. So what he did in the second, one half's worth of play was just absolutely torching them. Yeah,
And
this
it's
guy's the truth.
yeah, and I even said the night before I was texting because we were watching we were watching Boise State, me and some friends, and I was saying, and he had a decent game. Ashton, not decent, he had a good game. Ashton had a great game. I don't want to trash him, but he had a good game. He's a good running back. Um, but I was joking. I was like, Cam Ward needs to go for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he's allowed 1 interception. Wasn't far off. 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So I'll take it. I think he's still on course. Again, it it's very
No
hard
one's
for you to
stopping him.
yeah, it's very hard for you to argue. I mean, even when I talk to people, when I tell them we have this podcast, everyone mentions Cam Ward. I mean, he is just he is the most electrifying man in college football. And he is the best player in college football. There, you can't deny that. Like 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like who does that? Literally, who does that? Like you said, by halftime, you could have benched him by halftime, put Emery in. I mean,
And
I don't know if we
let's
would have won,
and let's
but
be honest, there is no other player in the country that has an NIL deal with Giorgio Armani now. Aqua the Gio. You don't
Aqua
see
de Gio.
Carson Beck rocking Aqua the Gio, okay?
Shout out to my high school cologne go to. That was my go to. I love that stuff.
All I know is next time I run into him after a game, if he comes up in the stands, I'm gonna go like, Cam, I don't smell that Aqua the Gio, man. Where did it go?
You're like, I need you to put the Sex Panther back on. I need it to work 60% of the time. I need it to work all the time. Another
Exactly.
thing I did take a note of, which kind of worried me. What did you think about this? Those two red zones where we fumbled the ball. I mean, we got one back, but we had some red zone attempts that were a little unusual, a little suspect.
Yeah, the one thing that was interesting about that one, the first like fumbled snap, I mean, that never
Yeah,
even got to Cam Ward. But what I'm wondering was, I forget if it was, I think JoJo Trader was in the game at that time, and they actually had him running in motion. So there was some sort of timing where I wonder if they were going to like fake a pitch, or they were actually going to pitch it, or like an end around kind of thing to JoJo.
yeah,
So I was curious about how that play was going to work, and then the snap just never came out. The second fumble in like garbage time, where Miami could have put up like 60, and he
yeah.
gets, sacked, fumble, turnover kind of scenario. One, I was glad to see him get up,
I just thought
but
that was
there was
yeah,
a
I
missed
was really
assignment there
worried.
for sure.
Yeah, and I watched that play a few times over, and I could not believe it. Everything I couldn't. The fact that I think it was Fletcher was on that. Fletcher got pushed back with. I think it was that Jalen Rivers. I think it was Jalen Rivers who got pushed back, and which is what led to that. And he just got berated. Like he just that hit from behind. Anyone's gonna fumble that. I mean, so I don't blame him for
Yep.
the fumble, but I thought the missed assignment was a little unusual because again, if Cam Ward gets sacked, I would say 9 times out of 10 it's him running around and holding the ball too long. It's
Yep.
rarely because of like a complete missed assignment and the guy gets through untouched. And that was one of those plays which kind of made me a little worried, but I was like, okay. I think what's great now that we're in going into week 11, we're 9-0. I think one of them I can say this definitively. I am really happy with the play calling, especially on offense. I couldn't say that in years past, especially in its solid decade. That's as far back as I can really go back and think of our offensive play calling. But our offensive play calling has been stellar, stellar. I think
Yeah.
we're doing the right plays. We're incorporating multiple weapons. So I mean, if you look at it, Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher both basically almost exact stats: 11 for 66, 12 for 65. Fletcher got a touchdown. But then you look at the wide receivers, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with double digits, and then you have 3 with plus 70 yards. You know what I mean? We are getting all these different weapons involved. I think I'm very pleased. I don't have a critique moving forward. I think again for the offense at all, they're our strongest point of reference for our team. But all in all, I was very pleased with this game. Again, minus the first half. But again, the funny thing is I felt like I knew that was going to happen. I just feel like we're a second half team naturally, and for whatever reason we love to play from behind. But luckily, those the coming from behind didn't really impact our rankings. I have the rankings up right now. Miami jumped up one spot due to Penn State's loss to number 4. What are you thinking about these rankings, Rudy? What anything stand out to you? I love how basically Clemson is still in the top 25, which I'm really happy about because I wasn't sure if they would keep them in there.
Yeah, the rankings were kind of weird because I was wondering what would happen with both Clemson and Pitt. I haven't really checked to see where Pitt ended up. Did they drop out of the top 25 completely? Because they were what, up
No,
to.
they're still in it too at number 23.
Okay, well then I'll take that to have your four top teams all in the top 25 in the ACC.
Yeah, and
Um,
Louisville creeped in too
go,
because with that win, they're at 25.
I wanted to touch back on the offense real quick though, because
Yeah.
one thing that I really love that they're doing, Shannon Dawson even said this in last year and this year in terms of when you have the right personnel, it makes you look a whole lot better and it gives your concepts a lot more teeth to work with. I love that they bring a new wrinkle every single week. So you could scout the same formations and like there's that 4-man set. We usually see
Ooh, that was a
a quick
great.
screen out there. That Jacoby George touchdown, a nice touch to that.
Yep.
A few other play calls were like they don't care. They know what the personnel is, and they could make any combination of that and still work. So that Cam McCormick touchdown, there are 4 tight ends on the field in that. And I was waiting for that one time that they would hand the ball off to Elijah Lofton and say, we're using you as a fullback. We're going to make
Y-
power eye football a thing
Right?
again. So the fact that they're using their weapons in multiple ways, to me, that gets me excited. I really
I
enjoy watching that, and I love where it's going to go.
I almost wonder too if the sputtering, and I don't want to say it wasn't a complete sputter, but I think I wonder if the second quarter was basically a setup for the second half, because they did that bunches with the 4 to the right side. They did that in the second quarter, and it didn't give a lot. It didn't accrue a lot of yards. And then that Lofton used as a fullback was a very interesting formation as well. And so I wonder if when they were using these formations that they knew would kind of, I don't want to use the word sputter, but it wasn't as explosive of an offense in the second quarter as it was in the first or third and fourth quarters. I'm wondering if that was kind of like the jab jab, in boxing, like the boxers will jab jab and then give the uppercut or the haymaker. I'm wondering if that's kind of where Dawson was going with that, where he's trying to set up these formations for the opposing defenses to bite and not be ready. Because yeah, that Horton touchdown over the top, it was telegraphed. I don't, I mean, again, I don't think I'm a savant, but I called it. Like, I literally, the lady was sitting next to me. I was like, they're gonna go over the top right here in this one, right at the top. Boom, threw it, touchdown. I was like, how do you? And Manny Diaz, like, I was impressed with his play calling for the first half, but the adjustments in the second half, he just could not. And I get it; it's a talent gap. There's a massive skill gap between our two teams, but there were some plays where there were players that were way out of position. Like, I was like, wow, this wasn't like a throw me up and like we're gonna watch the best athlete get it. This was like receivers wide open, and then us just like telling you like, hey, we're gonna run it this way, and you just could not stop. And that whole like offensive line carrying Damian Martinez or Fletcher, whichever one was running that extra 4 or 5 yards. I mean, that's got to be taxing on the opposing defense's emotions. Like, you're getting a stop.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And especially when both of them are in the same backfield. Like when they run those formations, we have Fletcher and Martinez on either side. I go, cool. One of them's gaining 5 yards. I'll
Yeah.
pick whichever one I want. And the same thing with yeah, they sputtered a little bit in that first half because some of those plays, you could see that Cam also just didn't really his accuracy wasn't there. There was a few
Yeah, it
missed
just
throws on his end. And yeah, Sam Brown too. Like there was one where he was supposed to like keep going or he thought he was gonna keep going, and Sam kind of just stopped. So
yeah,
like,
there was a lot.
yeah,
There was not a lot, but there were two distinct plays I remember where there was a complete miscommunication in where the receivers were supposed to be and where Cam was throwing it. And again, I think I wrote it this way. I wrote it go, this team doesn't seem to feel challenged. They seem very disinterested in their opponents. And again, I don't know if that's just Cam's like calm demeanor, but yeah, in that first half, it just seemed he seemed very disinterested. Like he was just like, okay, like this isn't really a challenge. And then he kind of locked it in halftime. And I almost feel like he locked it in also because, and I know he doesn't think this way. I know that, but like there is a difference in the first half Cam and the second half Cam where he was just like, no, I need these stats. Like I need to show out right now, or else like we're not going to get where we need to go.
there was one really important piece too, and that's Jacoby George's involvement in the offense. He was kind of non-existent in the first half. In the second half is when they really started getting him going. So that one touchdown drive where I think it was like the shallow curl to Restrepo to finish it off was like all
Yeah.
Jacoby George. That throw to the sideline that was, right on the money. There's a funny piece from that too because Jen and I have our seats in that club box right next to Miles Young's parents, one of the walk-on defensive backs, and they were telling us, they said, Miles covers Jacoby George in practice. And the way
Oh, I didn't
that,
know.
they work together, like the way that they work against each other, Cam Ward's best ball always goes to Jacoby George. So if it's like the most like the one undefendable, like most perfect ball, it's always to Jacoby George. So that touchdown they threw in the second half is evident of it. And same thing with that sideline throw. It makes perfect sense. So once they started connecting again, you could see that the offense started to go because we're trying to shut down like Isaiah Horton or Xavier Restrepo. Then once they started using Jacoby George to open things up, that opens up Restrepo, that opens everybody else for the rest of the
Yeah, Restrepo had a day. You know what I mean? Eight
game.
eight
Yeah.
receptions for 146 yards, 3 touchdowns, longest reception 66 yards. He's in the record books, the greatest wide receiver at UM. You know what I mean? It's just like props to him. Was it his birthday? on Saturday? I thought I heard that. Was it his?
I don't think I have no idea. I have to go look
I
into
don't know.
that.
I thought
Maybe it
I
was like
thought.
the week before or something like that.
Oh yeah, maybe. I don't know. I was just like, this guy's he's getting a lot of attention. I also thought on that one play to Restrepo where he had that really quick curl where Cam Ward threaded it in with those two defenders. The funny thing
Yep.
was Jacoby George was wide open on the outside, like wide open. So
Yep.
he could have gone in that direction. He could have gone to either receiver and got a touchdown, which I thought was great. But it's funny you mentioned that thing about practice because this is something that I've been wondering. Why do you think our secondary struggles when they practice against the best wide receivers?
It could be a mixture of things. It could be that you're getting you when you play against great competition, if it's close, it's empowering. If they're just annihilating you in practice, it's deflating. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh great, I'm gonna go out and defend another passing attack. But also it just could be the differences in the way Miami's offensive system works. Like when you're preparing for a different team's offense, you're not playing first string Miami offense, you're playing the scout team. So it's like you're wondering, okay, these people are simulating this style of offense. That's one thing to defend against. But when you're
Okay.
going straight up against your own team and your own, your own players, I think it's a little you pick up your own tendencies, but not every team obviously runs the way Miami's offense does. So they might be thinking, oh, well, this is the right move to go. This is where Cam would go, but that's not where that's not where Malik Murphy's going to go, or that's not where who are they playing next week? They play
Georgia
Georgia
Tech.
Tech. So Haynes King, if he's back from injury, that's not where Haynes King's going to go. So that's
No,
where
yeah.
I think it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, and my other worry about the secondary, and I think we mentioned this last week, is just the spacing we're giving opposing wide receivers. I think we need to play a little bit more tight. I think we need to also have a little push right off the rip, like right as soon as the ball snap. A little press would be nice, just because whatever when I go back and I watch this film and I go back and I watch the highlights and the condensed games, when when the opposing team is catching the ball, there's very few times where it's contested balls. It's usually they're 2 or 3 yards off whatever DB is covering them, or God forbid, a linebacker, and then they're catching it in I don't want to say full space, but it's space, and then they're making a move, and there's a missed tackle, there's an arm tackle, and then they're getting chunks of yards. That was something that kind of like really ate at us at the beginning of this game, was those quick passes where it was like the yak that they would get, the yards after catch that a lot of these receivers and running backs were getting. And so I'm just wondering, I'm like, and I get it, like they can't tackle in practice all the time, but I'm like, I think as we get towards the end of the season, get that in the routine a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm concerned there too because after some injuries that happened late in that game, like Jadis Richard came up with a weird kind of like ankle situation on his return after he got like plastered by two offensive linemen from Duke on the interception. I want to know what's gonna kind of happen there because the thing I'm trying to figure out with Miami's defense and the way that they're like arranging their personnel right now is, are they going to try to just get the best 11 players that are out there, regardless of position, or are they going to try to go through their defensive back depth a little bit more? Because I think you're looking at the way the safety situation works out. If you can move Zaquan Patterson into that safety spot next to Mish Powell, you can move Jaden Harris down to cornerback or something to try to make up for that because OJ Frederick has been just fine. And when he has safety help, you could see what he can do because I'm pretty sure that two of those deep ball interceptions were in his general area. One of them
Yeah.
was Mish's interception, and the other one was him kind of cutting in front of Jaden Harris. So that's where I'll take those kind of mismatches all day long. It's just a matter of can they get the right personnel to get the best chemistry? And if it means moving a safety down to corner, hey, you got to do what you got to do to win the game.
Well, I think that's been there. I think that's been the issue is you've got players who are not playing, like even to a certain extent. Mish Powell, they're sometimes bringing him in as a to cover, and they're bringing him down as a nickel, and it's not his. Again, he can play it, and all these guys are extremely talented. Don't get me wrong, but like when you can put them in the positions that they prefer and that they're suited for, I think that's when you're going to have the success. But I get it also, like the depth is not good. I mean, we are playing a lot of. This is my silver lining in this season with the defense, and especially the secondary. A lot of these guys, Zaquan Patterson, you've got OJ Federic, these guys are all freshmen. So they're going to get better. They're getting all these reps in. My hope is that it's not demoralizing for them going into next season because, again, I don't know what the postseason is going to hold, but something tells me people are going to exploit this. People are going to see what we've been doing. They're going to know our weaknesses. They're going to know we can't, especially communication issues. That's the biggest issue, I think, and we still continue to do that. And so I hope that they just build the confidence. They continue building confidence. Hopefully, the communication gets a little bit better. We got 4 games to clean it up. So I guess we will see. Is there anything else we missed, Rudy, from this game that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, there's one last thing. I'll
Yeah.
say, um, I'm really glad that the officiating had no real impact in this game
Oh
because
my
there
God.
were
Thank
some
you. Can we
there were
take a
some calls I
moment?
was like wanting to complain about, but the fact that it didn't get in the way of the game, I'm happy with.
Listen, I think because was there one in FSU? Was there any like questionable calls in FSU where we were that may have swung the pendulum of momentum? I don't remember. It's 2 weeks in
I
a
mean,
row.
there's FSU fans that want to cry about it, but I'm
The
not so
balloons.
worried about them. Those the balloons to
Yeah.
celebrate, but celebrate 2 games without referee interference. Don't get me wrong, like there were a couple calls in that game, like that one. There was one drive that Duke went down like 75 yards to score, and like 40 something of those were Miami penalties. I think the
Yeah.
first two were kind of suspect, like the defensive holding that was away from the play, away from the direction of the run. They called an unnecessary roughness where an offensive lineman was like holding our guy for like an extra 5 seconds and he kind of like gives him a shove. And they throw the flag for that. The offensive, the pass interference was justified, but then there was also like the first, I think, touchdown drive in the second half where that amazing catch that Moore had, that like one-handed,
Yeah,
the
bro.
play
That
right
was
before that was the
wild.
throw to the other sideline that was incomplete because the ball was bobbled and he steps out of bounds with it. I'm like, they're not even going to replay that. So I'm glad that like the game was so far out of reach that those calls don't mean anything. And I would like to have every game be like that. The less we can have these Miami's being saved by the rest conversation, the better. Because
Yeah. I mean, we
yeah,
still 5 penalties, 52 yards, not that bad. What is concerning when I'm looking at it too, another thing that I didn't realize is our third down efficiency. We're normally a team that's like I think hovering around the high 80s for third down efficiency. We're 6 for 12, so 50%. Got to clean that up, boys. Got to clean that up. Well, I think that will wrap it up for tonight with our weekly recap. We thank all of you for joining us. We'll see you guys on Friday for our week 11 preview, and we'll talk about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, right, Rudy?
Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets revenge game from last year. Can't
Oh,
wait.
yeah. I guarantee you this. We will definitely be kneeling if we're up in the fourth quarter.
We might take several knees, and that's what I'm looking forward to most.
I hope we do. Well, Rudy, I'll see you later this week. Everyone, have a great night. Have a great week. We will see you guys on Friday. And as always, go Canes.
Go Canes, baby.